The Drum Candy Podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
Hey, what's up, everyone? We are at episode 12 of season 3. This is actually going to be the final episode of season 3 of the Drum Candy Podcast. My name is Mike Dawson, and I'm coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is a special week. It is actually the second anniversary of this podcast. Hard to believe 2 years ago, I was brought back into the podcasting world with the new show here, the Drum Candy Podcast. It's been super cool. I can't believe we've got 3 seasons done already. And I thought this would be a good time to end this season because I have a lot of ideas in the works and I want to spend a couple weeks to tweak. You see back here, I've got a multi-stream setup now so I can do more lessons with multiple cameras. We're still going to be doing our 10 Reasons to Love. I've still got a bunch of interviews I've already done. I've got a bunch scheduled for next week. But the big thing is I want to focus more on using this space where I can record things, do some product demos, kind of live on the show. And speaking of live, we might even start doing some of these episodes actually live so you can join us and ask questions to the guests as we're recording it. So we're going to end this season here with an interview with my good friend Chris Popadak of the band Hawthorne Heights. He goes by Poppy when he's playing drums in the band. He goes by Chris when he's off stage, handling all the tour manager roles for the band. And they also have a festival, Is for Lovers Festival. So if you go to isforloversfestival.com, there's events taking place throughout the country. They just did Hawaii. Chris is one of the co-producers of that, and he kind of tour manages the whole thing. I interviewed him right before he started a drum camp over at Mike Johnston's place in Folsom, California. So it was a super fun hang. Chris is such a cool guy, and we dig deeply into the kind of multiple roles as tour manager and all that kind of stuff, as well as his drumming and how he got involved in the band and why he's at a drum camp when he's already in a successful rock band. So hope you enjoy, and this is Poppy.
Got it.
All right. No more cursing. Stop talking crap about Mike Johnston.
That's right. Johnston, day one. I hate the dude.
Is this the first day or second day?
Today's day 2.
Okay.
Yeah. I told him last night that I will hate him this week at some point.
What time does it start? Are you an early riser by trade? It's like you're in California, so 8 a.m.
Yeah, it's 8 a.m. I try to be up before 9 most days.
Yeah.
But if I don't have like a heavy schedule and I'm not doing anything, then I just kind of get up whenever I want. But today I went to bed purposefully early last night to be up.
I guess you're still on East Coast time, right?
Kind of, yeah. Because I just flew in on Sunday, and so I've been on the East Coast for a while. On the end of the tour it was all East Coast, so the time changes. It's fine, and I'm getting up and getting work done anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep.
So you literally ended the tour when? Friday, Saturday?
Saturday night, Richmond, Virginia. Got off stage, trailer was loaded by 12, and I went to the airport and stayed up and took a flight at 5:40 in the morning. And came out here.
All right. So my first question for the podcast, thank you for coming on. You're
welcome.
So being that you have a career as a drummer in a band that's touring, that's kind of doing what everyone aspires to do, why seek out education and go to a drum camp?
Because I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't. I've played my whole life, but with no structure, with no purpose. I guess I'm just playing songs because that's what I do. And there's a lot of dumb luck involved in being in a band that, I am not an original member of the band. I've been friends with them since they started. So I watched their career literally go from playing to 20 kids who didn't care to thousands who really cared. And I got in on a point where their original drummer left. So I just kind of stepped into it. So, I dumb lucked into that, but I can play the songs, like I can play the drums, but I told Mike yesterday, I'm like, I don't actually know what I'm doing. Like, like I know how to play the songs, but if he says like, oh, here's the pattern, if it's something that I can't figure out, I want to know why can't I figure it out? Like what's keeping me from learning something? Like, I potentially have something coming up where I'm going to have to learn a lot of things that I've never played. And I'm going to struggle at some point because I just don't have the practice in to learn a song. Like I'm going to have to dumb something down, and I just want to, I don't know, grow on the instrument. It's really fun. Like just to like have that, oh my gosh moment where I can do this now. So yeah.
So have you taken any lessons?
More about growth. Literally, no. I took a lesson with you, and I've done Mike's lessons for about 4 years this month, maybe. I'd never taken a lesson ever in my life.
So you were well into your career when you decided to start like investigating how to play this thing. It must have been overwhelming information overload.
It's still overwhelming. Like that's the hard thing is like, there's so much to learn, but really I'm finding out it is the most simple, basic things that I need to have dialed before anything else really matters. Mm-hmm. Like if I can't do, like I have no idea how to do like foot ostinatos and play anything over them. Like I can play like, so that comes into independence, but there is so much to learn. So I kind of think that that's a great way to think about it, is like, you're never too young or too old to start practicing, mm-hmm. because you're never gonna know everything. And even if you think you do, like play it better, like get better at what you can do. And that's a lot of it. Like I really want to feel more confident, even if it's just a matter of like playing the songs that my band plays. I want to be better, or I want to be able to give it a little something else. And I'm only going to do that by practicing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I've had adult students, and oftentimes, the first question I ask is, what do you want to be able to do? And it'll be something like, I want to play like Vinnie Colaiuta or Jacques DeJohnette. And for me, it's overwhelming as a teacher. It's like, well, we have to go back to, do you understand a quarter note? Do you understand time signatures? Like you're talking about decades of practice that have been built up for Vinny to be Vinny or Jack mm-hmm. to be Jack. So as a teacher, it's hard for me to kind of like, how far down do you want to go? Because we really have to go back to, can you clap in time? Like, can you do that first?
I mean, even the stuff that you taught me, I wrote it out on my pad, and it is literally like, everything's kind of like, can you do everything gridded? Mm-hmm. Can you accent a paradiddle on every note, with like freedom and like confidence, I guess, like it's one thing to just kind of play randomly, and like, which I do a lot on the pad. I kind of have my warm-up stickings that I go through, but then if I really slow them down, I'm like, well, sure, I can switch from, doing a single, double paradiddle, going back and forth, but like, can I change an accent? And I'm like, no. I'm like, all right, well, there's my practice. Like, that's what I should practice. And I don't know if that ever makes it to the drum kit when I'm playing live, but eventually it probably will, when that like muscle memory kicks in. Mm-hmm. Like I did not know what a paradiddle was until hearing probably, your previous podcast, and like kind of like hearing like, oh, I remember somebody telling me that, but I never played it. Now it is unbelievably natural. Like I can, so it's one of those things like you eventually, those things just start to take shape in your body, and they will make it to the drums eventually. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for, is that I can learn how to take the pad stuff to the drum kit.
What does Mike have in store for you this week? I don't know what he's doing this year for camps.
This year is great. It's all about recording.
Okay.
So
cool.
like we had to track stuff yesterday, and I'm like, this is perfect. I told him, I was like, I've tried to come twice. I've had to cancel for touring. And, but I'm like, that's what my band does, is record. So, and I'm terrible at it. But, so yesterday it was like, all right, you're going to track this song and you have to do it. He's like, I can't. He's like, you're going to track this song in some form or another. Even if you have to simplify it, you're going to like play the part. So, yeah. So today I don't know what we're working on, but yesterday it was like, learn this part, figure out how the song goes. What are you going to play? And I think yesterday he was a little bit kind of feeling us out. Like he just put on a click 90 BPM and said, all right, 3 bars of groove, a bar of fill. Can you do that 4 times? Can you keep your count? So yeah, it's all recording, I think, this year, which is pretty neat.
What's the process with Hawthorne Heights for writing and putting together stuff to record?
I think it's more common now, but typically the 2 guitar players and the bass player, they'll go into, my guitar player has a studio and it all starts there. Like somebody's got an idea. If it's like writing time, they'll typically block out time and go down in there and work on something. But my guitar player is always writing. And when he writes, he likes to fully flesh out a song. He doesn't like, oh, I have this riff, that's gone. He doesn't really do that too much anymore. He likes to write, program all the drums, get a feel for like what this song might be, and then he'll track it and then send it over. Or he'll be like, hey, do you want to come over today? I'm going to work on something. You can maybe kind of like tell me if you think this is what you would play. So a lot of it's just spent in the basement, them working on ideas. And then really it's kind of like, here's the demo version. Now play it and kind of make it your own. And then if something doesn't work, maybe we'll change it like in the practice space, but they tend to do it all at the computer now, which is very different, because when me and him started playing 20 years ago in our other band, we would just go to the practice space and he's like, oh, I have this riff. Let's go loop it for 2 minutes until we find something. And we don't do that anymore. So I think it's technology, and I think he has his process. And, and like very few people want to just jam and have like chaos, but then sometimes the chaos, something really great comes out of it, but you have to be patient. And I don't think a lot of people like have the time just to like sit in the room anymore when we're like this far in our lives and like, with what's going on. So, the writing process is really weird. It's not that I don't have a hand in it, but it's kind of done when I get it.
That seems to be super common. Anyone who's a teenager listening to the show, now's the time to get with your friends and jam on riffs for hours and hours and hours. I was in my parents' attic every other day. We would just play Chili Peppers riffs for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
You don't do that as an adult. It just doesn't happen.
No, like my son plays drums, bass, guitar, and he had one of his friends came over one day and came in the basement and they just were down there jamming. And I was like, oh my God, this is so good. Just to hear them like play off of each other and see what comes out of it, like that's the stuff that you did when you were younger. And I think as we get older, it's like, if you have a place to play and it's like, we're going to go play for 8 hours today in the practice space, like there's something to be said for that, but you really have to block that time out as an adult. Like you have to. When you're a kid, you really just have nothing but time. Like, oh, I'm not in school. I'm going to go hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
Screw around.
Yeah. It was like play basketball one day, skateboard a little bit, get to drink it on the drums and just jam.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really miss that, but also I understand it. You're trying to be efficient. And if they've got an idea, like they're better, I can't write a song. Like they know what they're doing. I'm playing the drums to the song. I'm not writing drum parts that they create something around. Like my role is to play for the song. So if he's like, I think it should go here. Like, all right, it's your song. I'll make it mine, but I'll play whatever's fitting for the group.
Do you guys work with outside producers? Is it all self-produced?
We've had 2 songs come out in the last 6 months, 7 months. And we did a 3-song session in Nashville with a producer from Canada. He just flew in. He's a young guy, and the record label was like, hey, we would like you to work with somebody outside of your comfort zone, somebody you don't know. So we did 3 songs with him, and they're great. I mean, the songs were already done. He didn't really produce as much as engineer. He had a couple of things that he did that, like, he was like doing the drums on the keyboards, and he like kind of changed a couple of things, but ultimately the songs were pretty much done. So I can give him credit for capturing it, but the guys in the band wrote the songs, and I think they went for like a little more modern, a little bit more aggressive. So when it comes time to make an album, we're going to a producer. When it's time to demo, it's just those guys in a room, and then, myself as well. But they're the ones, and they've been doing it for so long. They kind of know how to self-produce a little bit, at least to like, all right, let's cut that out. It's too long. How long's this song? And then that's when we'll take it into a studio and really like, what do you hear? What have we done right and what have we done wrong?
Do the songs evolve once you take them on the road, or are they road tested first? Or are they kind of like locked in and you just play them as they are?
They're kind of locked in. On this tour we just finished, we played a song that came out like a week or 2 before the tour started. We'd never played it live. Like, I didn't really even track it as a whole piece. I tracked it in sections because I didn't write it and I didn't know how to play it at the tempo we were at. So that one was like, okay, let's just get through it. And now that we played it like 25 times, there's a couple, the song structure is locked in, but there's nuances that change from the recording. There's like maybe a different, like I know that at the end of the song, I have a couple extra snare hits that I didn't do on the recording. But other than a couple like little stops and starts that me and the bass player might stumble upon, the songs are pretty much true to the record. Which, I love. Like, there was a band called Fugazi, and their whole thing was they wrote songs, took them on the road, and played them and got them tight, and then recorded them. So they would tour, so that way they were ready to record. And now for most bands, you make music and then you go support it on tour and you play it. I like their idea better, but from a financial standpoint and like a marketing standpoint, I kind of understand. Like, you want the song to be out, you want people to know it, so that way when you do play it live, they're excited and they're not just looking at you going like, I don't know this, play something I know. But I think, if you're practiced and you're ready to go in the studio and you know how the song goes, it makes the tracking a lot easier. Where it's like, the song that we did is called Lucerne Valley, and I literally heard the demo. I never played it before we tracked it. And he was like, oh, it's this. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't program it. And I'm like, and we're paying for this, and I don't know what I'm doing. That's really frustrating. So
how did you achieve it? You did like verse, chorus, like in chunks just to get the parts down?
Yeah, he would be like, all right. I really only had problem with the verse because it just had this ghost note with like, it was basically like a syncopated like rhythm where it's just something that like I knew I could do. I just needed to practice. And if I had to go track it right now, I'd be like, I got this because I played it 25 times on tour, and even like the first couple of days, they're like, you've got this. I'm like, yeah, I just needed to practice it. But in the studio, yeah, little chunks, he'd be like, okay, let's just see how far you can get. Okay. Can you give me just give me the chorus, we'll play in, we'll play out. I'll punch you in, punch you out. So, a little bit of like using the technology to get those parts down. But, like even a singer, they're very rarely singing a whole song. Like they're doing like 2 lines at a time, and drums are different because you have all that noise. It's harder for the engineer, but we got through it and it came out great. So the producer did a great job with the editing and piecing it all together because I was there. It was not as seamless as it sounds.
I love your humility. You sound great, dude.
he did not like, I do know that he didn't like have to like cheat much. I was able to play. I just didn't play every part like as good as I should have. You probably had to move some stuff around.
You guys are on the road so much. Do you rehearse in between tours, or do you kind of work it out on the first show?
I play a lot, and I'll practice the songs on my own. The general rule is be ready when it's time for the rehearsal before the show. Like if we're going to go on tour, we'll get together and maybe practice once or twice before a tour, depending on how many songs we're throwing in that we haven't played in a while. So really it's like, okay, let's work on those 2 songs. So we'll give it a day or 2 and then we'll just use it as sound check to actually rehearse and like dial it in. But the band's been around for 20 years. The catalog is kind of, it spans a lot, but most of the stuff that we have to play, we've been playing for years. So there's not a ton of rehearsal unless we're doing like oddball songs or whatever. But I think me and our guitar player, Mark, like we make sure we dust everything off before it's time to get into the practice space and prepare.
Is there ever talk of like, maybe we just don't play these old songs anymore? Or is it you respect the catalog?
It's so to have a career 20 years in and people actually, it's like, we want to come see your band. They do want to hear newer songs, but they want to hear the songs that they connected with the band when they were 14, 15, whatever. They really want to hear that. And honestly, for us, it's fun. I mean, I wasn't in the band when those songs were written, but every night that we play them and I see people like singing along, I'm like, the show is for them. Like it really is. Like we love playing, but we're servicing the fans, not ourselves. So like, why would you do, it depends on how long your set is. On this tour, we had an hour. So we played, like half of our catalog was stuff that I've actually been a part of. So we played 6 songs from the past and 6 songs from the present. And so we did mix it up. But if we have like a half-hour set, we don't have to question what we're playing. We know, because I mean, I guess to some, not to toot their horn, but they have 6 songs that the fans really love, and 3 of them were singles, kind of hits. So it's like, all right, those are getting played for sure. So, I mean, really, there's never like, we're not going to play this tonight. It's not an option.
How long was the set on the recent co-headline?
An hour. We were slotted for an hour. So each headliner had an hour.
Okay.
So 12 songs and then a lot of like story time.
Interesting.
So if we blaze through the set, it'd probably be like about 40, 45 minutes if we just ripped them out. But the singer was like explaining songs and he likes to talk to the crowd. So that's the other thing, like making that connection with them. And, and there was a lot of like, thank you kind of, we know that 20 years into this, they could be moved on to anything else, but they're still coming to our shows. And I think he like just wants that connection with those kids because it means something to them, Same with those songs, which is kind of why we play those old songs.
So the other side of that I want to dig into is you have the role of tour manager. So what leading up to when you actually wheels in motion on the road, what is your responsibility to get that happening?
So my main role is finding out, like, on the band side, what do we need? What are we traveling in? How are we getting to the shows? What's our gear situation like? What can we take? So it's more of a logistical thing. And then what it really comes down to is my role is to advance all the shows. So I'm contacting the promoter. I'm in touch with our booking agent or our manager to find out where we're going, who's my contact. And then I have to just set the show up. Like I kind of dictate, the times that we're getting in, how does the show run, basically setting the day-to-day schedules. And then, so I probably start about a month out from tour and I just start getting all my emails, like writing out my like script and getting the Dropbox links together. So I'm kind of connecting with all the bands, getting all of their audio stuff. Like, what are you traveling in? This tour was easy because we just had one bus and a minivan. So there wasn't like, I have 4 buses on this tour. Where am I parking them all? So it was pretty easy. And every show was exactly the same. Like minus, the co-headliner switching, the times never changed. Everything was like, it was one of the easiest tours I've ever had to do. But when it's like a headache, if you're dealing with like smaller venues or maybe bands that are a little unprofessional, let's call them, it makes the day-to-day harder. But really, like, I'm just kind of making sure that everything I do leading up to it, by talking to every individual promoter or production person, that I've got all of my questions answered. So when I go into the show, I can say, what we're doing and we know what we're doing. And if we have crew coming in, I've got to make sure that their flights are taken care of. And now I'm kind of like, I'm paying our crew. So like, I'm just kind of handling everything on tour. And this one specifically, like, so I'm drumming, TMing, and I'm also like loading, the trailer. But every day we'll have, at this level that we're on now, we're playing bigger venues. They'll have like, we call them hands. So we'll have 2 or 3 people like helping me and our merch guy get everything out of the trailer into the venue and then back on. But we're in the middle of our second year of festivals for the band. So the other 3 guys were handling festival stuff every day. And I would be at the venue setting up, like I set up everybody's guitars. Well, kind of, like I would build the stage. And then, so I was kind of stage managing as well on this tour, but it's like, I'm here, let me just set everything up. So that way we can like sound check when you guys are ready to walk in the room. It's really just like being the guy with the answers. If a band's like, hey, what's this? Where is this going? Like, I just have to have the answers for them. Sometimes it's terrible. I had a tour where I got a lot of gray hair and I said, I'm quitting. I'm done. Like, I hate this dude or this person. Like, it's just like, but then this tour, I had 17 people that were professional. And it was like, oh my gosh, like there was literally not one bad day on the tour with anybody. And that's pretty rare.
So the other bands have their own tour manager, or are you kind of the overseer of the three bands or whatever?
I'm typically the overseer. I think it's a little bit of control issues. I like to, but also the promoter does not want three bands sending emails for the same show. Like they just don't. So I typically, like if we're headlining, I will take the reins and I'll tell all the bands like, hey, I'll advance all the shows. And then I'll have a point of contact with each band, which typically, if they don't have a tour manager, it's typically the singer. It wasn't this tour. If we're supporting a band, then I don't really have to do anything. Because my guys are they're self-sufficient. They know the deal. They know their jobs and they're good. Like I don't have to like order them food. Like I've seen too many tour managers where it's just like, those guys, they're not children. Like, why do you treat them as such? Or why do they act to be treated like children? So, but that's just their personality. My guys are not like that. So if we're supporting somebody, I'm just the point of contact for that tour manager. And he or she, a lot of women out there tour managing, and they're so much better than we are as guys. But, lately we've been doing, the last two tours have been headliners. And then at our festivals, those are going to be wild because I'm kind of the point of contact for a lot of stuff, but the festivals are so much bigger than us. Like we're not even close to a headliner. Like in Cincinnati, we have Jimmy Eat World as our headliner. Like that's, I'm just going to be the person connecting with their tour manager and kind of being a liaison. But last year when we did the festivals, like, oh, so are you the TM? And I'm like, I guess, like, like reluctantly, I'm like, there's like 40 bands. I guess I'm your guy, but I'm also screen printing t-shirts and I have to play at 3:30. I'm like, it's a lot. So I can say when it's my band and like our friends, it's really easy. Like they make my job really easy. And we're not dealing with a lot of, I've had to go to some people. So me, I don't know if you call me Chris or Poppy, but the running joke for me is Poppy's the drummer. He's fun. He's a good time. Chris is the guy who will say, let's go to the ATM. Where's my money?
That was my next question.
and I had to do it in Atlanta. And he was like, I don't have it. I'm like, I don't care. You have a contract. I'm like, you didn't do your job. I'm like, the posters that we sent you, I saw them in the trash can. So let's go to the ATM. And everybody was like, whoa. And I mean, I was like, don't care. And that was probably 7 years ago. I don't think I've had to do that in a long time. I had a guy in Vegas try to pay me too much money. And I was like, is this a joke? Are you trying to get me like to mess up? I was like, you don't owe me that much money. And then he called his boss and he's like, oh my gosh, I almost gave you. I'm like, yeah, you tried to pay me way too much money. So the next time we went back there, I settled with the same guy and I just said, listen, tonight, if you try to give me too much money, I'm taking it. So make sure your numbers are in order.
Yeah. So the settling. So at the level you guys are at, you still have to wait to the end of the night and it's a cash transaction or a check. I mean, that's.
Yeah, it's a check or like a wire. We typically just do checks, but a lot of times, like we had on this tour, like the first 3 shows were sold out. So the settlement was easy. We already knew going into it. The show sold out before the doors even opened. So if it's that like that, it's pretty easy. It's cut and dry. Spreadsheets. A lot of these venues were Live Nation, so like they have, it's not a kid who's booking our band. It's like a company, which is good. And, they take the good with the bad there, but I typically don't have to like worry about, are their numbers right? Because they have to be, like, they're corporations. But there's been a couple shows where they're like, "Hey, do you want to settle?" I'm like, doors are still open, tickets are still selling, and if we hit this many tickets, we get a back end. So I have to, it's like, unless I know like we're not going to get close, the guarantee's the guarantee, or if it's like a sellout offer, meaning like if one kid comes or this show sells out, the guarantee is the same. I can settle maybe beforehand, depending on, like where I play in the set. But yeah, it's typically like waiting till I get off stage and like kind of pack up the drums. Maybe I load the trailer, then I go settle, but yeah, that's every night, making sure that we get paid and making sure the money's right. And then, I let the other bands collect on their behalf because that's their money. It's like, okay, just look over the settlement, make sure it's all right, make sure they have what they need. But I like to let the other bands do that, because whenever we're not headlining, I'm the one who goes and gets paid, and I make sure that money's, what it's supposed to be.
So how do you carve out your day to become Poppy? Like how do you go from Chris to the drummer in the band who has to play at 100%?
I think everybody knows to respect, like, okay, we're either, on this tour, we either played 2 or 3. So we played either 820 or 940, something like that. And I think the overall understanding is up to about an hour before your set, just leave the band alone. Like, don't try not to like bother them unless you need them, because they're probably going to start like getting into that headspace of playing a show. And because on this tour we had one backline, there was no real changeover. Everybody used the same stuff. So I would just like, all right, I would just leave and go wherever I wanted to go, grab my pad and just start getting sticks in my hands to start like warming up, or I would go stretch, whatever. And just everybody kind of does their own thing, and they all kind of disperse, and go wherever they're going to do, or they just sit on the bus and just hang out, but that's like the preparation for the show. So, by the time doors open, like, I really do switch from tour manager to musician, because once on that tour specifically, it really ran unbelievably smooth. I never had to go to anybody and say, "You're on stage in 5 minutes." So 6:30, it's fully me as a musician. And then when I get off stage, I turn back into the crew guy, if you will. And that's pretty common. I usually have like at least a half an hour of downtime, and that half hour is all I really, if it comes down to it, that's all I really need to like get my head space where I'm like, okay, it's time to play a show. Every now and then, depending on the show or the festival, I'll get a text. I'll start getting like, my phone will start going off. I'm like, I don't have time to deal with this right now. But sometimes you do. This last tour is just kind of like, it couldn't have been better.
You're spoiled now.
It allowed me to like, just like enjoy both of my jobs, and not be like, oh God, I have to set this up again, or I have to like every day. I was like, okay, let's load the trailer. Let's unload the trailer. It went really smooth. It's not always like that, but I'm hoping that it stays like that for a bit.
How'd your kit hold up with 3 drummers playing it?
3 drummers. We went through a bass, not through it. One of the other guys, he is a heavy hitter with his foot. Like he is heavy. He's like, I dented the kick drum. It was a Evans UV1 and with a pad. And I'm like, that's their most durable head. He's like, I think we should change it. I think it's going to break. 2 days after that, he's like, I dented the head. I'm like, what are you doing?
Using a wood beater? And what do you got going on?
Actually, I think he went through his felt, and I think he was hitting, like, he said it has like a little wood ball on it.
Mm.
But I'm like, I think you're just hitting wood to Mylar. But we only changed the rack tom once. We never changed the floor tom. So like technique wise on the hands, I think everybody knows how to play. I think that drummer for Armor for Sleep, he just has a really heavy foot. He plays a lot of notes on the kick and he plays them, but I'm like, you play solid. But I mean, the kit said Star Classic, it's durable. It stays in tune. Like there were no problems with that drum kit. And that's why I brought the one I did, because I knew it could take the beating. But I had 2 drummers who respected the drums and their players. So they treated it like theirs. And I was like, this is great. You know, that's not always the case either, but I think I knew who I was getting into, you know, like I'm letting these people use my drums and I was fine with it.
Was that your decision as tour manager or as?
It was actually decided by my singer in the band. He's like, why you want to bring 2 drum kits? I'm like, well, I'm sure Nash wants to use his. He's like, yeah, but there's no room in the trailer. I'm like, there's plenty of room. But it turned into everybody flew home from Richmond, Virginia when the tour was over. So the bus went back to Ohio. So my drums could live on it. It picked us up in Ohio. There was no flying of gear. So it just kind of turned into, well, for the ease of use, so nobody has to fly with gear, do you want to just use all of the bands, like all of our gear? And so, you know, they just brought their snares and cymbals and kick pedals and that was it. So it was kind of like one band, he's like, can I use all of your stuff? Because we're in a minivan. We can't travel with anything. So I said, sure. The other guy, kind of the same thing. He was like, if I bring my hardware or bring anything else, I'm not going to be able to get it home. So I said, yeah, that's totally fine. So essentially it's like renting a backline in a way. You know, like it's there. You don't have to worry about it. It just happened to be my kit rather than a backline company's. And they didn't have to pay for it, which was nice.
Yeah, that's great. And you were teching essentially for everyone then.
Yeah, I told him, I was like, I want to build the kit and I want to tear it down. And they're like, okay. So yeah. But that was my 10 minutes of therapy, you know, I guess. Like,
yeah.
But I also like, you know, when it comes to packing them up, I want them to go back in the cases how I want them to go. And, you know, the setup, like, but they would always help. Like, it's not like they were like, you know, but if they were doing their own thing, it was just kind of like, okay, you guys go do your thing. I'll load in. I'll make sure the stage is ready for whenever the bands walk on. And I just wanted to make their day as easy as possible as well.
So were they changing like cymbal stand heights and that kind of stuff, or was it?
Oh, yeah, a little bit. The other 2 guys kind of played similarly. They were lower, but their cymbals were high. And then I would raise the stool and the snare and then drop the cymbals. So it was really like odd. Like they were like Dave Grohl, you know, like super high hi-hats, low snare. And then I would just shrink the gap and like go like, you know, 3 or 4 inches from hi-hats to snare. So, but it wasn't like nobody really moved everybody kind of played the kit how I set it up or how it got set up. And I think that made it like challenging, but also really easy because none of the mics had to move.
Right.
Yeah, it was, you know, and like I just told the sound engineers, I'm like, this is going to be the easiest day you have all week. Nothing's moving.
Were you rolling with house engineers?
Yeah, we used all house engineers for everything. Like, we very rarely get to bring any sound, or have our own sound engineer. We are controlling our own in-ears now, but we still use the house to kind of set it all up and patch and mic everything. But yeah, so we're, I'm meeting the sound guy every day, and I'm like, all right, this is your venue. Our band knows what we sound like. Just make us sound good to the fans. Most 21 days, it was great. 3 days, it wasn't.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Pittsburgh wasn't a bad one.
No, Pittsburgh staff was great. Yeah, that theater, their staff is really good. Yeah. The crazy thing is like the 3 shows where, it's like, okay, I don't know their lives. I don't know what they're doing. The shows were great. I was like, oh my God, like, thank God, because everything leading up to it was a disaster. But then the show was like, these kids are wild tonight. I'm like, all right, and they were really, 2 of them were one of the funnest shows of tour, but like the day was terrible on my end. Well, for everybody's like, that was bad.
Is it just like a logistics thing, like my coordinating with staff or whatever?
I think one venue, it's like the monitor person would be great and the front of house would be bad. And I don't mean bad like just getting flustered or like whatever. And then one monitor guy, he was just, nothing was patched right. And it was almost like he didn't like know his board. And I was like, I don't know if he's new. If he's new at this, then you cut him slack. If he's done this for a long time, then he has other issues that need to be dealt with. But I think there was some substance abuse issues here and there with some of these people. I'm like, I don't think you're actually mentally here. And I think your job is suffering. And if I was your boss, you would be fired today.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, it's like, you should be let go. You don't know what you're doing. And this is a professional setting, and that's not professional. Like, but yeah, it's hard. Like, if you're meeting this person, you're with them for maybe 9 hours, 10 hours, really. Like, you're on stage and they're at the front of house. It's hard to communicate. So you just kind of hope that they can do their job well. And most of the time, 95% of the time they do. And that's why they work at these venues, like a House of Blues venue, that their staff is going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the other thing too, as like a tour manager, I really deal with every single person in the venue. The production, the settlement, the front of house, the lighting, the monitors, everybody that's like there, like I'm the point of contact. So I'm dealing with all of them. And it's very rare that I meet somebody where I'm like, oh my God, you're terrible. It's usually like, oh, holy cow. Like the last show in Richmond, the guy I settled with, as we got done, he starts talking about like drumming and like, he's like, oh yeah, I studied jazz and I got my master's in like hand percussion. And I'm like, why didn't we talk about drums? He's like, you have my number. Just call me. We'll talk drums. And I was like, all right. Like it was so awesome. Like, my singer always makes fun of me because I like will learn their names because I deal with them all day, either through text or just like face to face. And like, I know more crew people in venues than I know some band members. Like, I don't even know some of my favorite bands' names, like member wise, but I can tell you like who does monitors at this venue or who's front of house because like I'm working with them all day.
Yeah.
And like, like their job is, it's their venue, but like my job is to like make sure that we communicate well and have a good show, because that's ultimately the whole goal of going on tour, is to put on a fun show for the people that bought a ticket to come.
So before the next run, because you had 3 different drummers hitting your kit? Or are you going to do a extra special check screws and things? I mean, how do you kind of rehab your kit before the next run?
Well, my next batch of shows, they're almost all fly days. We have our festivals, so it's called Is for Lovers, and we're doing 8 of them, and they start. Oh my gosh! Like we have one in like 2.5 weeks in Hawaii. Like I leave next week for Hawaii, so there'll be a lot of backline kits coming up in my future.
Yeah.
And then the next tour that I do, I think will be in September, and I'll take my other kit out that's sitting at home right now. So I'll probably just change the heads on it. I mean, the one that I just took, I'll just clean it when I get home, or I won't. I won't. You know, I don't play it a ton, but that's why I brought it, because it was like, it's the one that I toured with before, and it has a couple of nicks on it. So, and it's just a solid kit. Like it just doesn't go out of tune. Nothing really comes loose. If I do change a head, sure, I'll go through and like make sure everything's like tight. But I mean, when I was teching for the old drummer and, you know, he left, and I reached out to Tom and I was like, I've been teching your drums and they're just wonderful. Like I would love to play for your company. And that was the thing. I'm like, I know that these drums are durable, and our former drummer he hit too hard. Like he demolished his drums. And I still never really had to like, I never had like them going out of tune, you know. Maybe his snare would like detune a little bit because that's just natural. But yeah, they're sitting in Ohio now, I'll probably leave them in the cases until I have a show that I have to get them out. But I will say I wish I could fly with my drums rather than doing a back line. And but for the next tour, yeah, I'll take I have a Birch Babinga Star Classic, and that'll come out on the road, and
nice.
I'll just get cleaned up and new heads and hit the road.
So have you had any backline kits that are just so way off your rider, or they've been pretty accurate?
A lot of times they'll be like, we don't have any Tommy kits. We have a DW. I'm like, that's fine. It's typically the right sizing, but I'm not really specific. The thing that I hate the most is when they don't have, like, if they don't have the hardware I want, or if they don't give me they'll bring a 3-legged hi-hat stand. I'm like, I don't want that. I'm like, I want 2. Like, I don't care about the drums as much, other than like if they bring me a kit that's the heads are shot on it. Like I got one kit, I'm like, okay, cool, you brought me a Tama, but the heads are not new. Or if it's one backline kit for a couple bands and I'm playing last, I'm like, oh, is it okay if like the other 2 bands before you use it? I'm like, well, do you have new heads and can you change them fast? He's like, no, I think it'll be okay. And then I get to the kit and they're like dented.
Yeah,
I'm like,
of course.
What are you doing? Like, I think I dented, Mike said I dented the snare yesterday. I don't know if it was me, because I'm like, I think there's a dent on that already. It might have been me. It might have been a guy before me. I'm not sure, but
swinging from the fences.
I mean, we were tracking, and he said, I heard him say right before I went on, he's like, you really have to lay into them so the compressors can do their job. And I'm like, I mean, I've recorded in a studio, so I know you're supposed to hit hard, solid, hard, center, you know, like consistent. But anyway, he was, I think I dented it. He's like, it's my fault. It's a single ply. But you know, when he plays, it's like, you can swing for the fences, but you can still, like, if your technique's good, you're not going to damage it. So one specific show was like, the drums were great. You know, really the thing that I hate the most, because they'll bring me, like, I'm a Paiste artist, so that's what I want. If I don't fly with my cymbals, And it's like, okay, here's what I want. And a lot of times they'll bring me like really like, they'll bring me like roods or just really thick and heavy cymbals and like rides that are pingy and not crashy. And like, that's when it's like, this doesn't sound anything like me and it feels different. The drums, like, you kind of care less about, because as long as they're solid, it's a solid drum kit, I can tune it and make it sound how I want. But the hardware and the cymbals and the snare, that's the tricky one. So I've been trying to fly more with my snare and cymbals just as a backup.
What is your snare? Is it an Acrolite?
On this tour, I played an Acrolite. Yeah. And I played it. I never had to swap out. I never had to I never broke a head. And all I got were like, man, that snare sounds good. Like, I know.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. I brought Superphonic as my backup, but I never played it. I think I sound checked with it one night just to hear like what it would sound like. And I'm like, no, I like the Acrolite better.
It's impressive. It didn't detune on you. Did you put locks on it?
No. I had one show where it did. I could tell because we're doing in-ears and, I can mix myself. And I'm like, my snare sounds lower, but it sounds great. It was kind of like just that like detuning one lug, and it just really does, like, because I have it. I mean, I have that thing tuned up. It's a cracker. But it's awesome. It's just dry. It's done. But that one day I'm like, man, this thing sounds great today in my ears. And I don't know what it sounded like on stage, but in my ears, it felt and sounded so good. And I was like, yep, that guy is loose. So I really didn't mind it, but I'm sure from song 1 to song 12, maybe the sound engineer is going like, what is happening here? But I loved it. That one's a solid drum too. It just doesn't really go out of tune very often.
I just remembered something when I saw Carl Brazil play with, I don't remember who, years ago. His snare detuned throughout the show, and I asked him about it, and he was like, yeah, once I realized the drum did that, it made sense because we played the slower songs towards the end of the night anyway, and it needed to be a fatter sound. So he's like, I don't care. I just let it detune throughout the night. I think he was playing a Black Beauty.
Really? Yeah. I have a Sugar snare, and that one I like to put locks on because I feel like I don't know why. I mean, every drum does it, but that one tends to like drop out the 2 lugs closest to me. And I don't know. I mean, I love it. It's like a great drum to play. Maybe I'm just smacking the crap out of it because it's like fun to hit hard. And I'm probably rim shotting that one a lot. Like, I'm trying to get better at like being deliberate with rim shot versus center. Hitting the center just it feels different. It really feels like you're not quite connecting with the drum if you're hitting hard. If you're hitting light, like it feels right. But like a really hard backbeat is like kind of wants to be a rim shot. So with that Sugar drum, I like to rim shot the crap out of it. So that's probably why it goes down. So that one usually has a lock on it. And that was my main touring snare. Once I got it, I was like, all right, this is the one. And every time I get like a new snare, the band guys are like, yep, that's the snare. Like, that one's awesome. And then I'll bring another one like, that one's pretty good. Or so I'm like, okay, I just have some good snares, but I didn't want to travel with that Sugar. I'm like, this is more like a piece of art.
Yeah.
That sound. And it's like, I think I'm going to leave that at home from now on. Like, if something happens to that drum, like, I'm going to be crushed. If I have a black nickel over brass Tama, like an SLP, one of their, Black Beauty kind of knockoffs. And it fell one day, and where the throw off was, it just dented the shell. Like, it just pushed it in. And like, I was like, okay, I'll just hammer it back. It still plays. But if that happened, like one of my wood drums, I'd be like, what if it breaks? So I just made the decision to take metal snares on this tour just for durability.
And the good thing with an acrylite, they all sound the same. You can just grab one anywhere.
Yeah. And I was trying to go also for like consistency, like the 5.5 and the 6.5 Ludwigs, like they're going to sound different, but they're going to be close enough. But if I had brought like my 8-inch Tama maple snare, one, I'd have to change my height in the middle of the set. It's not, I couldn't just grab the snare, put it on, like it would be too high. And it would sound so much different than the acrylite in the middle of the show. It'd be like, oh, that it sounds different now. And I think that was like something I thought about, like if I had 2 acrylites, that's what I would have brought. Like I think my backup should be a matching snare for what I'm playing. Not like, oh, I'm going to change it up tonight, because we just don't do that. Like even our slow songs, I just hit center of the drum instead of a rim shot, just for that, like a little bit of difference in sound.
What heads are you using? I need to know. They're that durable.
On the snare, which obviously I changed that like a couple of times on the tour, probably twice. Evans HD dry or ST dry. I bought both for this tour, and I just grabbed whatever the first one I saw. My toms are G2 coated, or I think I started with UV1 coateds. So, and then, but I know we changed the rack tom, and I think I just had a G2 with me. But I'm typically coated G2s or UV1s. And my snare, I like the HD and the ST. Kick head, I think I have an EMAD on it now, but I started with the UV1, and that's what the guy dented. UV1 coated, and yeah, it was awesome. Like I tuned it up. I mean, it's a 22, but I tuned it so much higher, and like, but I think everybody was like, "Oh, it's high, but it sounds really good." I'm like, it does. Like, I'm not really much of like a real deep thuddy bass drum guy. I like it, but I like the way like just heads cranked feel. Like I just really want to be a jazz drummer. That's what I really want to do.
Oh man. Like, well, we're almost at the end of the hour. So, we have to talk about what your first snare was. That's always one of my last questions, or what your first kit. You had a cool kit that we talked about before, a Rogers kit.
Well, yeah, but that wasn't my first. I got that when I was an adult. My first, I've thought about that. I've listened to your show, so I know. I don't know what my first snare drum was. I had one, but I think my first drum kit that I got, it was a Ludwig. I know that for sure. I think my mom got it at a yard sale, but I do not remember if it came with a snare drum. Like for some reason, I don't think it did, but I can't picture a snare. I know the apartment I played in, it was a Ludwig. It was red. I don't know what it was. It could have been a rocker, or it could have been something just like incredibly wonderful. But the first snare that I can actually remember having was like a 65, 66 Ludwig. And it was like the white marine pearl.
Oh, wow.
That was like aged. It was like smoky. It was like yellow. And that's the first snare drum that I can actually remember owning. So that to me is like, that's the snare I can remember. But I don't even know. I don't even know where I got that. Cincinnati, like in the 90s. I was probably, somewhere around like 17 or 18, I think, when I moved to Cincinnati and I got that drum, because I didn't really have a kit up until then. Like I had a kit when I was 16, and that was that Ludwig kit that had a snare drum, but I don't even know if I had a cymbal when I had that kit. Like it just, I'm like, oh, there were drums. And I feel like there were no cymbals, but there had to have been a snare. So we'll go with a really cool Ludwig snare that I traded fair and square. I got ripped off because he was smarter than I was. A 13-inch, I think it was a 13-inch Pearl Piccolo.
Oh, no. One. Yes, of course. Everyone had those in the 90s.
I walked into a drum shop. I mean, I was playing in a hardcore band, and the Snapcase, there was a band called Snapcase, and they had an album with, like, if you're into hardcore, it's like, that snare drum is amazing. And I'm like, I want that sound. And I thought you had to get a piccolo. So I walked into a music store in Cincinnati, and I said, hey, I have this drum that's just not really loud enough for what I do, which it wasn't. And I was like, he's like, what are you looking to do? And I was like, well, like, there's this piccolo upstairs, like the brass one. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know what that really meant. I was like, no, it's a black one. He was like, what do you want to do? I'm like, you want to trade? And he was like, yeah, go get that drum. I don't know how much that snare is worth, but it was worth more than the $100 piccolo that I got.
Yeah, but not to you, because then you were happy and you were playing with the right sound in your band.
I was playing the right sound for I played that drum for way too long. My God. to be young and not know any better.
I actually got my niece that drum for school band. It came with like a bell set and a music stand and the
really, like,
they've repurposed that piccolo because no one uses it on drum set anymore. It's like the beginner elementary school band snare.
God. Instead of like a Ludwig.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of like a good quality.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I remember that, like, Ludwig case, when I was like 16 years old. I remember seeing it. Maybe my drum kit came with one because I can remember that, but maybe I just had the case. You know what I mean? But that, like, yeah, I really wish I knew. Like, I've even asked my cousin, I'm like, do you remember my drum kit for when I was a teenager? He's like, I remember you playing in the apartment. I'm like, yeah, but what was it? Like, I don't know.
You'll never know.
It's wild. I'll never know. So I'm going to lie to myself. 65 Ludwig, that's gone.
In reality, it was a 3x13 pearl steel piccolo with the black powder coat finish.
Oh my God, what a piece of crap. No, great for the right time. I would never buy it. Never, ever again.
All right, Chris, thank you for coming on. I know you've got to get ready to go play drums all day, so I won't keep any longer. And
thank you.
Hopefully you'll be back through Pittsburgh soon, and everyone go check out a Hawthorne Heights show, go to their festivals, follow you. Your Instagram handle was XPoppy or something. What is it?
XPoppy, Poppy.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, have fun. Tell Mike I said hi, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike. I'll see you later.
All right. Once again, go over to isforloversfestival.com if you want to learn more about the festival that Chris helps co-produce. Hawthorneheights.com for tour dates. You can go to littlemonsterprinting.com if you want to check out his printing company. His Instagram handle is xpoppyx if you want to follow him there. And again, thank you all for listening. It's been super cool to celebrate 2 years here, 3 complete seasons, and there's so many more ideas that I can't wait to start sharing. And we're going to get more of you back involved. I still have some listener questions and some intro beats, but I felt like this season got a little bit disorganized just on me because we're doing so much work with the Drum Factory Direct website that it's been hard for me to really execute this show like I want to. So like I said, I'm probably going to take a week or 2 off to kind of restructure, get organized, film a bunch of content, get a bunch of interviews lined up, get a bunch more of these 10 Reasons to Love taken care of. So the show's going to be bigger and better. And I thank you all so much. Have a good one.